Emperor Kaelthas stood motionless at the edge of the obsidian terrace, his scales shimmering like molten copper under the 3 sons of Draconis Major. For 7,000 years, he had ruled the celestial dominion, an empire spanning 1,200 star systems, yet the weight of eternity pressed upon his shoulders like chains forged from time itself. The throne room behind him echoed with silence. The morning tribute ceremony had ended an hour ago, and once again, every gift had been refused. The Valkorian merchants had brought crystallized nebula fragments that sang with the birth cries of stars. The Phosian collectors offered memory stones containing the last thoughts of extinct civilizations. The Quantari engineers presented a device that could fold space itself, allowing instant travel across galaxies. All rejected. Kaelthas flexed his talons against the black stone railing. His wings, each spanning 40 meters when fully extended, remained folded tight against his armored back. He had long ago stopped counting the treasures offered to him. Mountains of gold meant nothing when you could transmute elements with a thought. Rare artifacts lost their appeal when you had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 cultures. "Your Radiance," came a hesitant voice from behind. Kaelthas turned to see Thornwick, his chief advisor, approaching with cautious steps. The elderly dragon's bronze scales had faded to dull brown, and his movements carried the stiffness of age, though he was barely 3,000 years old, practically middle-aged by dragon standards. "The delegates are expressing concern," Thornwick said, his voice low. 700 consecutive rejections. The newer species believe you mock them. The older ones fear they have lost your favor entirely. "And what would you have me do?" Kaelthas asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "Accept gifts that mean nothing? Pretend gratitude for objects that cannot possibly interest me?" "Perhaps that is precisely what an emperor should do," Thornwick replied carefully. "Politics requires certain performances, even from dragons." Kaelthas let out a long breath that sent wisps of smoke curling from his nostrils. "I have performed for 7 millennia, old friend. I have smiled at fools and praised mediocrity. I have accepted tributes and pretended they mattered. But I am tired, Thornwick. So very tired." The advisor said nothing. What could he say? He had watched his emperor grow increasingly distant, increasingly hollow. The vibrant young dragon who had united the Dominion through brilliant strategy and fierce compassion had become this empty shell, going through motions that had lost all meaning. "There is one more delegation," Thornwick said finally. "The humans from Terra Nuovo. They arrived this morning." "Humans." Kaelthas repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. "The species that joined 5 years ago? The ones who barely discovered faster-than-light travel? The same. They are young, unprepared, and frankly, I expect they will bore you as thoroughly as everyone else. But protocol demands they be seen." "Then let them come tomorrow," Kaelthas said. "I have had enough disappointment for one day." He spread his wings and leaped from the terrace, catching the thermal currents that rose from the volcanic vents below. Flying used to bring him joy. The rush of wind, the freedom of the sky, the sensation of pure movement through three-dimensional space. Now it was simply another action, another way to pass the endless hours. Kaelthas flew over his capital city, watching the millions of beings below go about their lives. They feared him, respected him, some even loved him. But none of them knew him. How could they? He had stopped knowing himself centuries ago. That evening, in his private chambers carved into the heart of a mountain, Kaelthas walked through his collection. This was different from the public treasury where rejected gifts were stored. This was personal, objects he had chosen to keep over the millennia. A sword he had carried in his youth. A painting by his long-dead mentor. Letters from friends who had passed into dust. Fragments of his own history, relics of a dragon who had felt things deeply once upon a time. He picked up a small wooden carving, crude and simple. It depicted a young dragon teaching a group of smaller creatures to fly. His mentor had carved it for him 2,000 years ago, shortly before she died. Kaelthas ran his claw over the rough wood, trying to remember what it felt like to care about something, anything, the memory would not come that he set the carving down and moved to the window. Outside, the three suns were setting in sequence, painting the sky in layers of purple, orange, and deep crimson. Beautiful, he supposed, in an objective way. But beauty required the capacity to feel, and that capacity had eroded so slowly he had not noticed its absence until nothing remained. A servant knocked on his chamber door. "Your Radiance, the evening meal is prepared." "I am not hungry," Kaelthas replied, though he knew he would eat eventually. Dragons required sustenance, even when food tasted like ashes. He dismissed the servant and returned to the window. Somewhere below, in the sprawling city, the human delegation was settling into their quarters. They would present their tribute tomorrow, some collection of primitive artifacts or natural resources. He would reject it politely. They would leave disappointed. The cycle would continue. Kaelthas closed his eyes and tried to remember the last time anything had surprised him. 10 years ago? A century? The memories blurred together, an endless stream of predictable events and expected outcomes. When you lived long enough, patterns emerged. When you lived as long as he had, everything became a pattern. "What would it take?" he whispered to the empty room. "What could possibly exist that I have not already seen, touched, or experienced?" The room offered no answer. Kaelthas had not expected one. He had asked the question 1,000 times before, always met with the same silence. Tomorrow would be another day. Another ceremony. Another rejection. Another moment in the infinite chain of moments that stretched ahead of him like a prison sentence with no end. The Emperor of Ash and Gold stood alone in his mountain chamber, surrounded by treasures that had lost their meaning, and felt nothing but the hollow ache of existence without purpose. Outside, the last sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness claimed the capital. In 12 hours, the human delegation would enter his throne room. In 12 hours, everything would change, though Kaelthas could not possibly know it yet. For now, he simply stood at the window and waited for sleep to claim him, hoping that perhaps in dreams he might remember what it felt like to truly feel. 19-year-old Freya Winters pressed her face against the transport ship's viewport, watching Draconi's major grow larger with each passing minute. The planet looked like a gem carved from obsidian and ruby, its surface traced with veins of lava that glowed even from orbit. "First time seeing a dragon world?" asked Tobias Grant, the deputy ambassador, settling into the seat beside her. "First time seeing anything beyond Terra Nuovo," Freya admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was cataloging soil samples in the agriculture dome. Now I am here, apparently representing humanity to an emperor older than recorded history." Tobias smiled. He was a weathered man in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You are here because you think differently than the rest of us. Ambassador Reeves saw that in you." Freya glanced toward the front of the cabin where Ambassador Patricia Reeves sat reviewing diplomatic protocols on her tablet. The ambassador was everything Freya was not: poised, confident, experienced. Freya was a junior xenobotanist who had been included in the delegation almost by accident, filling a vacant spot when another scientist fell ill. "I still do not understand what I am supposed to contribute," Freya said quietly. "Neither do I," Tobias replied cheerfully. "But that is the beauty of diplomacy. Sometimes the unexpected person says exactly the unexpected thing needed." The ship docked at the obsidian spire, and Freya felt her stomach flutter with nerves. The structure was impossible, geometry that should not exist, angles that hurt to look at directly. As they disembarked, she kept her eyes on the floor, following the delegation through corridors that seemed to shift when she was not looking. They were led to guest quarters that were larger than Freya's entire apartment back home. Crystal walls showed views of the city below, millions of beings from species she had never imagined. She spent the evening sketching them in her journal, trying to capture the strangeness and beauty of this alien world. The next morning, Ambassador Reeves gathered the delegation in their common room. "The tribute ceremony is in 2 hours. I need everyone to understand what we are facing. Emperor Kaelthas has rejected every gift presented to him for the past 15 years. Every single one. So why are we even trying?" asked Dr. Hammond, the team's cultural attaché. Because protocol demands it, Reeves replied. And because not trying would be seen as an insult. We present our gift, it gets rejected, and we maintain diplomatic relations. That is the goal. Freya raised her hand hesitantly. What are we giving him? A compiled database of Earth's historical achievements, Reeves said. Art, science, philosophy. The best of humanity preserved in crystalline storage. It took 4 years to compile. The delegation spent the next hour preparing. Freya felt useless, simply standing around while others made last-minute adjustments. She clutched her satchel, which contained her journal and a small wooden box her grandmother had given her before she died. The throne room stole Freya's breath. It stretched upward into infinity, walls of black crystal that seemed to absorb light. And there, on a throne that looked carved from frozen night itself, sat Emperor Kaelthas. He was magnificent. Copper scales caught the dim light, each one perfect. His eyes were pools of liquid gold, ancient beyond measure. His presence filled the room like atmospheric pressure, making it hard to breathe. Ambassador Reeves stepped forward and delivered her prepared speech. Freya barely heard the words, too overwhelmed by the Emperor's sheer existence. When Reeves presented the crystalline database, Freya felt a flutter of hope. Kaelthas glanced at the offering without interest. Rejected. The word fell like a hammer. Reeves maintained her composure, bowed deeply, and began to lead the delegation out. Freya followed, her heart sinking. They had come so far, prepared so carefully, and it had meant nothing. As they reached the massive doors, Freya stopped. She could not explain why. Some impulse, some instinct she did not understand, made her turn back. Wait, she called out, her voice small in the vast chamber. The delegation froze. Ambassador Reeves looked horrified. Protocol demanded they leave immediately after rejection. Speaking again was considered extremely rude, but Freya was already walking back toward the throne, her legs moving before her mind could catch up. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the wooden box her grandmother had given her. Your Radiance, she said, her voice trembling but determined. Our delegation brought knowledge and history. But I have something different. Something that might mean nothing to you, but it meant everything to someone I loved. Kaelthas's golden eyes fixed on her. Freya felt like she was being examined at a molecular level. She forced herself to keep talking. My grandmother was a painter. Not a famous one. She never sold a piece or had exhibitions. She painted because it made her happy. Before she died, she gave me this box. She said it contained her most precious treasure. Freya opened the box. Inside was a collection of small paintings, each no larger than her palm. They depicted simple things. A sunrise over Terra Nuovo's single ocean. A cat sleeping in a window. A child's hand holding a flower. The colors were vibrant, applied with obvious love and care. She told me these were the moments that made life worth living, Freya continued. Not grand achievements or rare treasures. Just small, perfect moments of beauty and connection. I know you have seen wonders beyond imagination. I know nothing I could offer would impress you. But these paintings are not about impressing anyone. They are about remembering that even small moments matter. She held the box out to him, hands shaking. I do not expect you to accept this. I just wanted you to see them. To know that somewhere in your vast empire, a human woman spent her life capturing tiny pieces of joy, and she thought those pieces were precious enough to pass down to someone she loved. The throne room was absolutely silent. Freya became aware that she had just committed a massive diplomatic error. Ambassador Reeves looked like she might faint. The other delegates stood frozen in horror. Kaelthas slowly rose from his throne. He was immense, towering over Freya like a living monument. He descended the steps with careful, deliberate movements. Each footfall echoed through the chamber. He stopped in front of Freya and looked down at the box in her hands. Then, with infinite gentleness, he extended one massive claw and picked up the smallest painting that it showed a woman and a young girl sitting together, watching clouds drift across a blue sky. The brushstrokes were simple, but the emotion was clear. Love. Connection. The kind of perfect moment that felt eternal while it lasted. Kaelthas stared at the painting for what felt like forever. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Freya had expected, filled with something she could not quite identify. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Rose," Freya whispered. "Rose Winters. And she painted these moments because they made her happy?" "Yes, your radiance." Kaelthas carefully set the painting back in the box. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He knelt down, bringing his massive head level with Freya's. "In 7,000 years, he said quietly, no one has ever offered me a gift that was about feeling rather than having. Everything brought to this throne room has been valuable, rare, powerful. But none of it meant anything to the giver. Your grandmother's paintings were precious to her, and now they are precious to you, and you offer them to me not to gain favor, but to share something that mattered." He reached out and gently closed Freya's hands around the box. "I cannot accept these. They belong to you. They are your inheritance, your connection to someone you loved. But the act of offering them, that is a gift I will accept. You have reminded me that value is not measured in rarity or power, but in meaning." Freya felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She had not expected this, any of this. Kaelthas stood, his golden eyes sweeping across the stunned delegation. "Tell your people that humanity has given the celestial dominion something we had forgotten. A reminder that small moments of beauty and connection are treasures beyond price. This is a gift I accept with gratitude." For the first time in 15 years, the Emperor of Ash and Gold had accepted a tribute. The throne room emptied slowly after Kaelthas's announcement. Delegates from other species who had been waiting for their own audiences whispered in confusion and awe. The ancient emperor had accepted something, after 15 years of refusals. And not some grand treasure, but the story of a human woman's simple paintings. Ambassador Reeves and the rest of the human delegation remained frozen in place, unsure what to do next. Kaelthas had returned to his throne, his expression unreadable. Freya stood at the base of the steps, still clutching her grandmother's box, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. "Approach," Kaelthas said, his voice cutting through the confusion. Freya looked back at Ambassador Reeves, who nodded encouragement despite her own bewilderment. Freya climbed the steps on shaking legs, each one feeling steeper than the last. When she reached the top, she stood before the Dragon Emperor, feeling impossibly small. "Tell me about your grandmother," Kaelthas said. It was not a command, but a request, spoken with genuine curiosity. Freya swallowed hard. "She raised me after my parents died in a mining accident. We did not have much. She worked in the hydroponic gardens on Terra Nuovo, growing vegetables for the colony. But every evening, after her shift ended, she would paint. She said it helped her remember the earth she had left behind." "She was born on humanity's homeworld?" Kaelthas asked. "Yes. She was part of the first wave of colonists to Terra Nuovo. She used to tell me stories about Earth. Real forests with thousands of trees. Oceans so vast you could not see the other side. She painted from memory, trying to preserve those images." Kaelthas was quiet for a moment. "And when she died, she gave you these paintings?" "She gave me 12. One for each year she raised me. She said each painting represented a lesson she wanted me to remember." Freya opened the box again, her hands steadier now. This one, with the woman and child watching clouds, that was her favorite. She said it taught her that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be present with someone you love. The Emperor reached out and gently lifted the painting. His claw was so large that the tiny canvas balanced on its tip like a leaf. He studied it with intense focus, his golden eyes moving across every brushstroke. I have collected art from 1,000 civilizations, Kaelthas said softly. Masterpieces created by the greatest artists in galactic history. Works that took centuries to complete. But I cannot remember the last time I looked at something and felt what the creator felt while making it. He carefully returned the painting to the box. Your grandmother painted with love. I can see it in every stroke. She always said that art was not about skill, but about meaning, Freya replied. She told me that a crude drawing made with care was worth more than a perfect painting made with indifference. Kaelthas laughed, a sound like distant thunder that rolled through the throne room. It startled everyone present. Thornwick, standing at the edge of the chamber, nearly dropped his ceremonial staff. No one had heard the Emperor laugh in over a century. Your grandmother was wise, Kaelthas said, still smiling. Wiser than scholars who have studied philosophy for millennia. She understood something fundamental that I had forgotten. He stood and moved to one of the tall windows. Come, walk with me. I wish to show you something. Freya followed, acutely aware of the stunned silence from the human delegation below. Kaelthas led her through a doorway hidden behind a tapestry, into a corridor that seemed to exist outside normal space. The walls shifted and changed, showing glimpses of different locations across the palace. They emerged in a vast chamber filled with rejected gifts. Mountains of treasure stretched in every direction. Crystallized starlight sat next to singing stones. Weapons that could shatter moons rested against artwork from extinct civilizations. It was overwhelming, too much to take in. This is 7,000 years of tribute, Kaelthas said, gesturing at the endless collection. Every object here is priceless. Every one is unique. And every single piece means absolutely nothing to me. Freya walked among the treasures, her artistic eye-catching details despite the overwhelming quantity. Why keep them if they mean nothing? Because disposing of them would be seen as disrespectful. So they accumulate here, gathering dust, serving no purpose. Kaelthas picked up a sphere containing frozen time, watching the moment inside play on infinite repeat. Do you know why I rejected everything for 15 years? Because nothing impressed you anymore? No. Because everything impressed me equally, which meant nothing impressed me at all. When you have lived as long as I have, when you have seen as much as I have seen, everything becomes data. Facts. Information to be catalogued and stored. The emotional weight disappears. He set the sphere down carefully. Your grandmother's paintings should not have affected me. By any objective measure, they are crude works by an amateur artist depicting mundane moments. But when you spoke about them, when you explained what they meant to her and to you, suddenly they were not just objects anymore. They were connections. Bridges between souls. Evidence that someone felt something deeply enough to preserve it. Freya understood then. You did not lose the ability to value things. You lost the ability to connect with the meaning behind them. Exactly. Kaelthas turned to face her fully. And in one moment of spontaneous honesty, you reminded me what I had lost. Not through some grand gesture or rare treasure, but through the simple act of sharing something that mattered to you. They stood in silence for a while, surrounded by fortunes that felt hollow. Finally, Freya spoke. What will you do now? I do not know, Kaelthas admitted. But I think I would like to learn more about small moments. About the everyday treasures that people carry in their hearts. Would you be willing to teach me? Freya felt her pulse quicken. I am just a junior xenobotanist. I am not qualified to teach an emperor anything. You are a person who still remembers how to value simple beauty. That makes you more qualified than most. Kaelthas began walking back toward the throne room. Stay on Draconis Major for a while. Teach me to see the world through your grandmother's eyes. Help me remember what it means to find joy in small things. And if I cannot? If it does not work? Kaelthas smiled again, an expression that transformed his ancient face. Then at least I will have tried. After 7,000 years of resignation, that alone would be worth celebrating. They returned to the throne room where the human delegation waited anxiously. Ambassador Reeves stepped forward, her diplomatic training barely concealing her confusion. Your Radiance, we are honored by your acceptance, but we are uncertain about what happens next. Your junior member, Freya Winters, has agreed to remain on Draconis Major as a cultural consultant, Kaelthas announced. She will help me understand humanity's perspective on value and meaning. The rest of your delegation may return to Terra Nuova with my regards and my gratitude. The announcement sent ripples through the assembled observers. A junior scientist, elevated to personal advisor to the Emperor? It was unprecedented. Thornwick looked like he might have a stroke. The other species delegates whispered in shocked tones. But Kaelthas seemed unbothered by the controversy. He had made his decision, and that was final. As the delegation prepared to depart, Freya clutched her grandmother's box and felt the weight of what she had just agreed to. She was supposed to catalogue soil samples, not teach an ancient dragon emperor about simple joys. But looking at Kaelthas, seeing genuine hope in those golden eyes for the first time in centuries, she could not bring herself to refuse. Sometimes, she thought, the most important moments in life are the ones you never see coming. Her grandmother had painted that truth in 100 different ways. Now Freya would live it, one small moment at a time. The Emperor of Ash and Gold had accepted his first gift in 15 years. And in doing so, he had taken the first step toward remembering what it meant to truly live.